writing books, writing novels, writing the story, writing what I want to do, what I want to be. I want to be published. I'd like to make some money, but it ain't about the money. Okay. When you have a dynamic, I came up with something that a friend and I played for years, and because his house was so colorful, so in depth, so much detail, uh, a period came where we parted ways for a while, and I found myself immediately more yearning for those game sessions because I was so invested in the world and the game world that we were playing and creating that I missed them. So on a lark, I grabbed a stack of paper, and in my spare time, I started writing what I thought would be the next move of the story of the game. And in this aspect, I didn't want to ruin the current game line, so I thought, okay, what would this guy's family life and house be in 20 years? Now, for the sake of clarity, a young fella, a young noble is displaced and is sent out into the frontier with a cater of support of servants and then a small colony effort of 10,000 people with the expressed understanding that they're going to survive, they're going to fail, they're going to succeed, but that's all they got. What they got is what they got, and they got to start with it. So this house is established, and it's one of many in a grand imperium of human controlled space. And this fella starts out with nothing, more or less, and works his way up the ladder and expands. And we add more characters as we go, and more NPCs, and then there's antagonists and protagonists, and things that go on, and the story develops and it takes off on its own. New characters come along, and some of them are not so hot, and some of them are just bloody brilliant in their concept, especially the way that they're portrayed. Their own voice is brilliant, and I don't know where it came from, even though I know at the end of the day, it came out of the melon up here in my imagination, and it wasn't me that put voice to their actions and words, and yet they are so different from me that it just astounds me that these are the same. Where did these people come from, and how are they populating my world? Right? Okay, I'm not even going to pretend to try to pretend I understand how that works, and I'm not going to. At this moment, I'm not going to get off on a tangent on that because I've got a couple of them that just we'll get those at some point. We'll cover. So this particular story goes. I have found myself missing the gameplay, and I sat down and started writing the story. I took my game to the novel level, literally. I decided to make a novel out of it. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to ruin the current gameplay with him. So, because, we might get back together again in the future and pick up where we left off, which I've done in the past with other games and stuff. So I said, what would his house be like in 20 years? His character was in the process of becoming married and establishing what basically was several mates, if you will, and that they were quite prolifically minded individuals. So what would they be like? And their kids are hitting that age of Luke Skywalker when he first set foot off a Tatooine kind of thing. And what would they do? How would they react? So my first character choices were not the prime characters or the main children, if you will, but the secondary children. So we're going to focus on book 2 because that's the subject of the crap I'm working on right now. I'm trying to get a typed draft of my original handwritten draft, and then I'm going to polish that, and then I'm going to stick this damn thing on Amazon and let it go and see what happens. Book 1 is in the process, but it got sidebarred because a piece of it is sitting in my storage locker in a spot that's inaccessible. So I can't really work on it. I can work on the lion's share of it, but I don't want to do that. The second book, for some reason, has a lot more flavor and fun to it than the first book. The first book establishes everything. The second book is something else. So the prime character of this book is a young prince named Lucklos. He's 16, 17 years old. He's this hybrid genetic thing. We call them thingies for a reason. His mother's Kataran, that she's a feline humanoid of an actual alien species. The father is a peregrine aviary. Aviaries are a genetically created cross between humans and birds. And there was reasons for doing this. Humanity has been messing with genetics for thousands of years. And in their case, they custom create things, thingies to fit certain environments or certain tasks or certain jobs. And some of these are very successful, and some of them are not successful, and some of them are utter failures to get away from them. And in the case of the aviaries were successful, but they did not go the route that the creators wanted them to go. Eventually, they became a very powerful subnation within humanity, the Imperium. So he's the Lucklos is the, like, I want to say child number 6. I'm not exactly sure on his placement. I think he's boy number 3, but he's child number 6. Don't quote me on that. And so he's a young man who's very sickly in his youth. He's because of his genetic breeding between these alien and human hybrids didn't do so well. He needed lots of medical care when he was young. Lots of technology was stuck in him to make him so he could function. So he's very introspective. To some degree, he's not unlike a certain character named Sheldon off of the Big Bang Theory. Not quite that in depth or that genius, but he has a knack. He has a knack for technology and for programming. And because he became, he had a bit of a dark streak in him, so he's notorious for bypassing things and getting into stuff. This drew the attention of the house spy mistress, who kind of took him under her wing to some degree, figuring that, the older children are going to be leading the military and leading the government. Somebody needs to be involved somebody in the house hierarchy needs to be involved in the intelligence ministry and the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. Why not this one? So Lucklos, the opening gambit from chapter 1 is Lucklos, who decides he's going to break into the secret vault of the Ministry of Intelligence. He's been in here several times before, but a certain device from 4,000 years ago has caught his attention. This device is extremely blacklisted, very bad. Matter of fact, the house could get in trouble with the Imperium for even possessing the thing, even in this deactivated stage. He wants it, so he goes in and steals the cortex out of it, which is the brain of the device. We don't need the devices. We don't need the MacGuffin. We need the brain for the MacGuffin, right? And that's what Lucklos does in chapter 1. And he's very good about doing it. He gets into a conversation with this thing. And surprisingly enough, this was not planned. This was not a planned thing. Him breaking into the vault was planned, but the dynamic between him and this computer cortex, which we'll call B12, develops into some pretty interesting situations later in the book, and it feeds the story. It's not planned, and that was, I look back at it now and I thought, Jesus, how did that occur? That's like Ping. That's like the reporter Ping and Lucklos's partner / bodyguard. How the heck did they get together? And their dynamic is something else. They go off on a couple mini adventures that are just absurdly funny, and they weren't meant to be. They weren't meant to be. As a matter of fact, we were kind of one of those things where you'd want to just chuck it, throw it on the floor. Then you read it and you start reading it to other people, and they're laughing their butts off, and you realize you got something there. Maybe you better not throw that one out. Maybe that one should survive the trimming and the cutting sections of the redrafts, right? The rewrites. So Dorget and Ping have a crazy dynamic, and Lucklos and B12 has a dynamic. It's weird how they feed off each other. Second part of chapter 1 is Thomas Castletine. Thomas Castletine is a human purist. He is a member of a cult called the One True Path. Worse than a member, he is a paladin of the Sons of Purity. He is basically a version of a special ops operative for an intelligence ministry for a extremely hostile religion. And religion in the future in my novel is not like the religion as we know it today. Things have changed. I'm not going to get into details on that because it doesn't matter. So in this case, there's a large contingent of people who believe humanity has made some terrible mistakes of creating all these hybrids of various purposes because it dilutes the gene pool of humanity itself. At some point, humanity, we see it's a futuristic version of the racial BS I grew up with around my life, and I still see today. The racial bullshit that we perpetrate on each other, on everybody, and in return, the same people retaliate back from it. Just when does it end? I get it. Things were wrong. Things were bad. Things are still bad because we got morons on every side of the coin. And some of them take it to the level of a religion. That's where you get these terrorist outfits like Al Qaeda and stuff. It's just absurd. At the end of the day, I think President Ronald Reagan had it right. If aliens show up, humanity will wake up and say, "Oh my God, it's us against them," right? But even then, we're still going to have some of that BS. It's going to take centuries or millennia, maybe never, to get rid of it, which is sad. I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I'm getting off in a tirade on that. I don't want to. I'm not a social justice, whatever the heck they are today. I just want the world to be a better place, and it can be a better place. So in my reality, it's worse. I write novels where things are even far worse than what it is now, and yet there are utopian things in there that make the world much better. For one thing, humanity is spread to the stars, so good luck wiping this out now, right? We're not self-contained in a little bubble that can be popped by an asteroid or whatever. Okay. Back off on track, getting off on track. So Castleton belongs to this one true path. Now these cultists have an in for anything that's not human, 100% purebred human. You either need to be on your knees or you need to be in a box, preferably in a box. Now this cult is very powerful and is spread throughout the Imperium. And in some places it is very powerful, in some places not so much. Usually in the areas of the frontier or in core areas that are dominated by a genetic human genome, if I call them genomes, of a different. So in the case of Ava Prime, for example, where the aviaries hold power, or House Hatheon, where the story set, how the aviaries hold power, the One True Path is the bad guys. And this aspect, at some point in the past, in the not too distant past, the House Lord, Duke Amel Flaytabar, has tossed the LTP out of his borders. He's mandated that they not be allowed to settle or to preach their dogma in his region anymore. He had enough of it. He's had his fill with them. This causes a number of conflicts in the past that carry through. So Castleton's people, in some response to some stuff that took place in book one, but also from a much larger problem from before that, has orders to go in and infiltrate and pave the way, if you will, for a larger contingent of OTP to cause some problems for the house. So we see his entrance to the story is beginning to establish his place. I ran into some issues with this because not the story or the character, because he's actually fairly developed from the previous story. And the OTP in my head are very well developed. I have a lot of stuff, a lot of backstory stuff on. My problem was when I started writing the intro section, his first piece into the story, I have a tendency, not unlike Stephen King to some degree, and a lot of others, to focus on details of things that are inconsequential to the story in general. So he walks into a prefabricated command bunker, and I go off on a 2-paragraph tear about how prefabs function. Prefabricated buildings in the future function. For all intents and purposes, it's the Jetsons car. These buildings are designed to have a molecular electronic signature in them with a device that lets you reconfigure them between a storage locker, let's say a garage, and a box the size of a good sized trunk. So when I need to ship this one car garage, I take everything out of it. I hit a button on the control panel. It compacts itself down into a block about the size of an oversized suitcase or a good sized travel chest. And when I'm ready to put it back up, I take it, I fire it up, I give it a little electricity, bang, it folds out and becomes another garage. So you can do this with very large buildings to a certain degree. The command center that the OTP is currently using in their forward operations base is a Tech 4 or Tech 5 level. It's big enough to house enough offices and workspace for up to 90 people. So that's quite a good sized thing. So when this thing's collapsed and folded up, it actually folds into something about the size of a moving van. And if you allow it to contain everything that's not organic, all the supplies and equipment and furniture and crap like that, it's a fully loaded moving van. And then they can pack that in turn into a shipping container or into a cargo bay of a starship and move it. That's the concept. Well, I went off on two paragraphs, just like I just did now, which means nothing to the story. See, now that's a piece I cut out and left on the floor when I revised my third revision of draft 1 of chapter 1. That is a piece that drops on the floor. I know how this thing works. My friend Shannon knows how these things work. If the reader really wants to know how one of these things work, I need to drop in tiny hints here and there and keep from overloading the story by going off onto a tangent that just halts the progress of the current story. The other section I have, a problem I have with Castleton is mostly Castleton's, the conversation in this is one-sided. He actually comes off as very bland, considering how nasty of a character he is. General Chaz, his current superior, who is tasking him on this mission that's going to eventually run up against Lucklos and a handful of others in the bulk of the story, he dominates that first entry. Thomas's dialogue's at a minimum. And then he leaves, he gets his orders, he walks out. Then he runs into another member of the intelligence ministry for the OTP and who gives him some basic information on a place he's supposed to be going to, just like Lucklos is supposed to be going to. But at the end of the day, none of them end up there. Their story doesn't take them there. That's how it worked out. We planned on them all having this dealing. All this was going to take place on this backwater mining colony / Wild West kind of scenario, but it never made it there. It didn't. It became a much bigger, grander thing when they got bogged down on a larger planet called Emerald. Well, one of the minor houses that owe fealty to House Hathion. So we reintroduce Castleton to book 2, and he's a key bad guy. And then we get into the last section of chapter 1, which is Amel Tabor. He is the Duke. He's Lucklos' father. In reality, he's supposed to be a backstory supporting character for the primary characters, which are all his children. Instead, his story is such a rich individual. He's also the main character that Shannon played for years. So it was real hard for us not to be off on a tangent with that guy. And a lot of what we do is through him, we see the world of Hathion, of the aviaries, of Stellar Frontiers, of the Imperium, of the stories, etc. Through him, we see the interactions of how different his house is his vision for his future of his people are compared to where he came from and those around him. And a lot of that is just fluff. It can be cut out. And yet it's hard to do that because I feel that it adds flavor, it adds voice, as I understand it, to the story in general. We need to still know that we're in the future, we're in a fantastic environment with a lot of things going on here that are not the same. We also discussed, Shannon and I discussed, after having read Game of Thrones, he had never read it. I had read it several times at that point, and I converged him to do it. He finally did. And then he was just enamored by all the dynamics of it. He finally began to understand my mindset to some degree, my wheels within wheels kind of philosophy on writing and gaming in general. I like a convoluted system. I like a lot of stuff going on, and not everything's clear cut. And so we determined we were going to have a prime character get killed by the end of the book. Very difficult to do. You invest a lot of time and effort into these characters, even the NPCs and protagonists, and even though you know you're going to whack one of these people or several of them before the end of the book, it's much harder to do than it sounds. So when we don't look at R.R. Martin doing this stuff, and he does it on a regular basis, and some of those people he whacks, you're like, oh my God, how could you kill that particular person? That guy, that why can't you kill this other one who deserves it all? Martin hooked onto something there. Hey, he hooked onto it with a vengeance. Only an idiot doesn't learn from other people's successes. I'm not plagiarizing him, but his success made me think that's what we got to do. We got to have some characters that we off, and some that are going to hurt. And so we introduce a character in section 3 of chapter 1 when Amel goes home, and that character is going to die by the end of the book. So that we have to make sure that the reader is invested in this character before the story is over. And that was a challenge. It was a challenge, and it was hard. And it was even harder because we both sat back when we actually concluded the deed at the end of the book with a gut check. Like, oh my God, how can we have done that to that particular character? And yet, it was that gut check reaction we had that made us think that other people will have it too. So we must have did something correct, right? I must have managed to get that connection in there somehow, especially since this character had never been, other than as a peripheral name in the earlier book and a note in a family history that we created some years back. This particular character was never introduced. This character lives and dies in book 2, but the death will cause a lot of things to take place in response to it that feeds us into book 3, because book 3, majority of it's written, and we know the fallout from book 2 and what happened, and what book 3, how they went about, what they're going to do to avenge this death, so to speak. Now, this character has absolutely nothing to do with Lucullus. Of the story, Lucullus has almost 500 pages of handwritten material. This particular character probably has 80. But yet, that's that wheels inside of wheels. While Lucullus is the prime character of the novel, there's actually several sub-stories going on that are intertwined with each other that feed into a much grander picture that is the series, right? There is the layer on top of layer on top of layer that I like, and it's hard. It's hard to do, and it's hard to be successful at it. This is when the outlines start to come into play. I don't pre-create outlines. I don't outline my novel. I have no idea where it's going to go or how it's going to end. I create the outline as we go. My outline is so I make sure we keep going in the right direction and we didn't run off somehow. Somehow the story didn't divert off the main path, or the piece of the story isn't flapping around out here in the wind. Can't have that. Also can't have any unfired cats. To do a thing on unfired cats. Very big thing. Very big thing. So, there's the 3 key storylines going on in chapter 1 of book 2. If you want to hear more, you'll catch with me later.